Hey everybody, it's Andrew here from the Revisionist Almanac. At the start of every month, I'm going to spend some time giving you a window into what I watched over the previous month, both new and old, and share my thoughts on some of those films. Before we get into this, though, I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel on whatever podcast streaming platform you're currently using, as well as rating and reviewing the show. In addition to that, you can find the show on every major social media platform, including Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, and TikTok, using the handle Rev Almanac. With that out of the way, let's get into some of my February watches. We are well and truly in the thick of the infamous Dumpuary period, where studios drop movies knowing they aren't any good or they just can't make any money. Most of what I watched in February is going to reflect this, as you're going to find out. Up first was Dogman. I went to go see this with my wife, my two boys, and some of their friends for my oldest birthday event. I'll start by saying I pulled a total idiot move, even more embarrassing because I go to the theater often, and I've literally never done this in my entire life. I bought tickets for the wrong day, only to realize it as the others came to claim their seats they'd purchased correctly. Fortunately, it all worked out. We found some open seats, and the kids never seemed to notice. Dogman wasn't exactly the best animated movie to appeal to the adults that attend these movies with their kids, but all the children in the theater seem to have a really good time, so that's all that matters at the end of the day. Our house is now adorned with Dogman merch in the weeks since, and now that it's up on VOD, we've watched it at least 5 more times at the house this month. Dogman's good enough at distracting the kids, and it's going to earn a score of 6.2 out of 10. The next movie I got to was Star Trek Section 31, Dumpuary Disaster Number 1. I'm more of a Star Wars guy than a Trekkie, but I've enjoyed enough of the television and the films of the past to be deeply embarrassed by how bad this movie was. It somehow is the rare film that will anger anyone who doesn't care much about Star Trek lore, and also the most diehard Trekkies will be repulsed by this embarrassment. Michelle Yeoh, I'm sure you got a nice paycheck for this, and fair play to you, but it was a total waste of your talent. The only logical score for this dumpster fire in space is a 3.1 out of 10. Up next was Kinda Pregnant, Dumpuary Disaster, number 2. If you're a fan of the comedy of Amy Schumer, and I'm sure there are a handful of you still out there, I guess you'll find some humor in this. For the rest of the known world, you'll recognize this as another stinking pile of crap put out by Netflix. I'm still looking at you, Unfrosted, which I have yet to get the putrid taste out of my mouth from. Kinda Pregnant is kinda terrible. It should consider itself kinda nice of me to award it a 4.1 out of 10. The next film I got to was Wolfman. We're always bound for a few dumpuary horror movies like last year's Night Swim. I just wish it wasn't from a talented director like Lee Winnell, or feature a talented group of actors, including Christopher Abbott. This version adds literally nothing original or different from the myriad other versions of this tale. Skip this movie and go back to the 1941 version instead. Hell, even go back to the Mike Nichols 1994 version starring Jack Nicholson if you want a version that's dumb but also doesn't take itself too seriously. This one had me howling at the moon wishing it was over. It's an average pedestrian version that can only get a score of 5.4 out of 10. Up next was All We Imagine as Light. Thank goodness for this beacon of sunshine in the midst of all the filth I'd been subjecting myself to beforehand. Payal Kapadia's film about nurses in Mumbai had a great showing at last year's Cannes Film Festival, winning the Grand Prix award, though somehow it was not nominated at the Oscars in the Best International Feature category, a complete and utter outrage. This was easily one of the best films of 2024, and you should go out of your way to check it out. The film was a literal ray of light in an otherwise gloomy month and is a great experience worthy of an 8.4 out of 10. The next film I got to was Nickel Boys, one of the last Best Picture nominees I was able to get to thanks to a very special listener of the show for providing the hookup. To that person out there, I salute you for your service. Now, I had heard a lot of hype about this film before I got to it, and I will just say, I totally get it. What could have easily felt like a concept gimmick, that being a first-person POV perspective for the majority of the film, is executed in a way that I've literally never seen before on camera. It's rare to come up with an idea so groundbreaking and yet still deliver the overall message and emotion of the story. a dark subject in American history I wasn't remotely familiar with beforehand, but dove into in order to learn more about it afterwards. Ramel Ross should not only be in the Best Director category, the biggest snub of the entire award season, in my opinion, he should genuinely be in consideration for winning the Academy Award. How in the world did he pull this off as a feature film debut? It's absolutely mind blowing. I had also been wondering what Hamish Linklater had been up to since his extraordinary role in the Netflix series Black Mass a few years ago, so it was a real treat having him appear in this, even if he was playing a dastardly evil character. Nickel Boys is going to age very well as it's ahead of its time and it's a great piece of art that I'm giving a score of 8.5 out of 10. Up next was I'm Still Here, the 10th and final film of the Best Picture nominees this year that I got to. It was also really refreshing to see a film entirely in Portuguese at a 10 a.m. showing on a Tuesday morning, with it being about 75% full. Just little old me surrounded by a bunch of 70-year-old women. My kind of crowd. This is the story of an important figure in the fight against an authoritarian regime in 1970s Brazil. I was not that familiar with the specifics of the family at the center of the film, but I did recognize some of the general historical points from that period of time in South America. Fernanda Torres plays the lead role, earning a well deserved nomination for lead actress. After watching the film, I can confidently say that as much as I love what Mikey Madison and Demi Moore did specifically in Honora and the Substance, Fernanda Torres is the best female lead performance of the year for me. She was able to convey strength and vulnerability in a profound way, with a stretch of about 20 to 30 minutes in the middle of the film leaving me completely shattered. I was full on waterworks for most of the film, and my face legitimately hurt for the rest of the day from the amount of crying I did. This is a testament to the power of the film, the writing, the directing, and the acting. I'm Still Here is a huge achievement in South American filmmaking, and something like this getting nominated for an Oscar is a big, big deal. Do not miss your chance to watch this film. It is legitimately one of the top 10 films of 2024 for me, and I'm going to give it a score of 8.5 out of 10. Moving over to Lake Mungo. We're going to kick it a little old school here. This is a 2008 Australian found footage horror film that was the recommend of my good friend Britt from the excellent 1001 by One podcast. Be on the look for her returning as a guest later this year with one of her podcast co hosts, Adam St. John, where we're going to break down the year 2001. Anytime I need a good horror film recommend, I know I can count on Britt. She might not love me saying this on air, but you should find and follow Britt on the socials and pester her to give you movie recommends. I promise you're not going to be disappointed. This movie's free on Tubi currently, one of the absolute best streaming apps that exists right now. Lake Mungo is a really slow burn ghost story that I found captivating due to the authentic performances of the actors and the building sense of dread throughout, culminating in some truly iconic moments at the end that will make you jump out of your skin. Don't be afraid to go into the dark waters of Lake Mungo because it's a horror fan's delight, and I'm going to give it a 7.7 out of 10. The next film I got to was September 5, a historical drama set around the news coverage of the 1972 Munich massacre that happened during the Olympics, centering around the ABC Sports News crew trying to cover the event in unprecedented circumstances. The film's shot in a way that feels like you're watching a film actually from the 1970s. It has a tightly crafted script and a solid ensemble led by Peter Sarsgaard and John Magaro. I am always interested in films dealing with journalism and news coverage of actual events, so I knew I would be predisposed to rate this highly, which I did. September 5 is a fantastic thriller that I'm going to give a score of 8.2 out of 10. Shifting gears a little bit, we're going to talk about Beatles 64, a new documentary currently up on Disney Plus that gives some new insight into the Beatles and their first tour of the United States as they were rising to superstardom. I am an admitted Beatles nut, so there really is no limit to the amount of Fab Four content that will keep me entertained. This is far from being on the level of Peter Jackson's incredible Get Back documentary series, which is also up on Disney Plus, but that's not to say this isn't a very palatable and enjoyable material for enthusiasts and casual fans alike. Beatles 64 is a very good film that comfortably gets a score of 7.6 out of 10. From one musical film to another, let's talk about Better Man. I'm all about the Britpop music, yet somehow the Robbie Williams catalog of songs both in Take That and as a solo artist were totally foreign to me. I was wondering if that would mean I'd find more or less to enjoy in this music biopic that subverts the genre, primarily thanks to Robbie Williams being played by a CGI chimpanzee. A great in your face way to confront the idea that celebrities often feel like they're animals at a zoo for our amusement. As much as I lament how formulaic and boring music biopics have become, I can't help but love everything that this movie does, revealing a backstory that was new to me and sprinkling in some incredible doses of music that made me instantly want to fire up a Robbie Williams playlist on Spotify and familiarize myself with his work. This is a genuinely great film that deserved much more at the box office, even if I can understand why it struggled so much to capture the attention of audience. So do yourself a favor and search out this film if you want to have a great time watching something that doesn't take itself very seriously and delivers a heavy dose of earworms and bangers on the soundtrack. Better Man's going to get a score of 8.4 out of 10 from me. Bridget Jones, Mad About the Boy. If you had told me last March that I would be here recording a recap episode and singing the praises of the Bridget Jones series, I'd probably have told you you belong in a straitjacket inside of a padded room because that would be a certifiably insane prediction, and yet somehow here we are. Between recently rewatching the original Bridget Jones from 2001 for prep of an episode later this year and checking out this new film that went straight to Peacock, I have come around a bit on Renee Zellweger and this collection of movies. Mad About the Boy is a touch too long, but has enough heart and moments of happiness that can melt even the coldest of cinephile hearts. At this point, I think people are either into the Bridget Jones movies or they're not. This one's probably not going to win over people who didn't love the others in the series, but if you're a fan of those past movies, you're going to appreciate where this one goes. It's breezy, it's an above average streaming watch, and it's going to get a 6.4 out of 10 from me. We'll move over to the next film, Paddington in Peru. Now, while I find the first two Paddington movies to be bona fide classics already, I've been surprised that neither of my boys has found them interesting during the handful of times I've tried playing them in the past few years. So I was not planning to watch Paddington Peru with either of them, but when my son came down with the flu, he wanted to watch something warm and comfy at the house, and we fired this one up. It starts out very whimsically and fun, and he was laughing his butt off within the first few minutes. The film is charming, it's sweet, it's silly, and it has all of the hallmarks you'd expect from a Paddington film. Is it as good as the first, or especially the second film, which is about as good as it gets in the genre? No, probably not. But is it still better than 90% of the stuff made with a children's audience in mind? Absolutely. Grab yourself some marmalade, cuddle up under a warm blanket, and enjoy taking a trip to South America with that fuzzy little bear. Paddington in Peru is going to get a score of 7.6 out of 10. Up next is The Gorge, the latest film from Scott Derrickson, which is currently up to watch on Apple Plus. It stars Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy, and I got to the film a couple days after it premiered, mainly because I had multiple friends message me about it, and it seemed like people on social media were having a great time with the movie. It was goofy enough and bounced between trying to be an action film and a romantic comedy, but the genre melding didn't really land as much as I was expecting it to. I think the CGI is kind of weak and the acting is a little bit stilted, even considering the two lead actors have a ton of talent. I'm very glad this was a straight to streaming watch, but like most Apple Plus original films, it fell flat for me in the end. I'll probably be in the minority, but it's a decent film I'll probably never think about again for the rest of my life. That's only going to manage this to get a score of 6.6 out of 10. The next movie I got to in February was Flight Risk, a new Mel Gibson film starring a balding Mark Wahlberg acting like an asshole to people on a plane. I guess this is the future of Hollywood under the new US presidential regime, seeing as Gibson is one of the ambassadors to quote unquote fix things and make movies great again or some dumb shit. All I could think about when I was watching this movie was how much terrible stuff Mark Wahlberg did when he was a younger man. Do your own research and look it up for yourself. I think he was channeling some of that anger from his teens and his 20s because he was just a foul mouthed dick, and the entire premise of the movie and the peril of the other characters in the plane did nothing for me. This was an average at best action thriller, and I felt like I'd wasted a couple hours of my day suffering through it. But hey, at least you'll get something more fun next time from Mel Gibson while he's currently working on The Passion of the Christ 2, Electric Boogaloo. At the risk of sounding like a cynic, This movie was total dreck, and it's lucky I'm going to give it a score of 5.6 out of 10, mainly because Topher Grace and Michelle Dockery keep this movie in the air longer than it should have been. Over to something much better. Let's talk about One of Them Days. While this story has the foundational bones of the Ice Cube and Chris Tucker 90s stoner classic Friday, there's enough here that distinguishes itself as its own brand of comedy and allows it to stand on its own. Featuring two very funny and believable lead women in Keke Palmer and SZA, as well as featuring a strong ensemble of actors around them, including Cat Williams, who chews up every single scene he's in. This is the type of R-rated comedy that we need to get more and more of. The script is written strongly and jam-packed with jokes that made me laugh from start to finish. Comedy fans should flock to see this because it's a very good time and lands one of them very good Andrew scores of 7.5 out of 10. Up next was Hard Truths, the newest film from acclaimed English director Mike Leigh, reuniting him with Marianne Jean-Baptiste, who was nominated for an Oscar in 1994 for Secrets and Lies. There was some early buzz in mid-2024 that this film might just garner Baptiste another Academy Award nomination, though unfortunately that didn't come to fruition. After seeing this film, I'm genuinely baffled by how she missed out on one of the 5 spots, as I would have easily had her in the top 2 or 3 based on the actual nominees we were given. She plays the lead role with so much ferocity and power, while delivering a character that is hard to love, but also easy to sympathize with as the film goes on. As is also the case with Leigh's films, it has a tight group of supporting actors that includes Michelle Austin playing Baptiste's sister and Twain Barrett playing Baptiste's son. The film is heartbreaking and really carries a lot of post-pandemic themes, even if Mike Leigh said that wasn't directly on his mind when he created it. It's not hard for me to speak the truth about the greatness of this film and its central performance. I'm going to give it an 8.4 out of 10. Next was Companion. Don't ask me how, but I miraculously was able to go into this movie having avoided all the social media chatter around it, which was heavy on the spoilers, and I avoided all trailers relating to it other than the tiniest of teasers in the theater last year, which gave away next to nothing. I don't think everyone will be as fortunate as myself, but I strongly urge you to go into this movie knowing as little as possible. It's loaded with dark comedy, deals with technology and power dynamics in some interesting ways, and was constantly twisting and turning to keep me enthralled at what was to come next. I had a very fun time with Companion, and I would recommend it to most sci-fi and horror fans. My score is going to be a 7.6 out of 10.
We're all getting fed up of endlessly scrolling for our next movie fix. So to get passionate about films again, join 3 movie mates on the Never Ending Watchlist movie podcast, where we take you on a movie journey as we seek to build the ultimate movie watchlist.
Seen all of those films are absolute bangers.
Yeah,
Absolute bangers.
bangers.
I applaud you again, sir.
We deep dive specific movies to find out facts, theories, and funny takes, and ultimately decide whether a movie is worthy of being on the watchlist.
I can't recommend this film.
Ouch.
We'll debate top 5s, rank directors' movies, and interview film fans just like you.
And she is an incredibly complex villain. She's fierce, she's immovable.
So whether you're a casual movie fan or hardened cinephile, we've got plenty for you to enjoy.
I got outvoted by the guy who chose the movie for this episode.
Join me, Damon Carter, Alex Hall, and Cam Young on the Never Ending Watchlist movie podcast every week on Podcast Everywhere.
It's easier to find Cameron on Facebook than it is to find a plot in existence. Right, anyway, for now, it's farewell to Alex.
I also watched one movie for an upcoming podcast guest spot that I wanted to highlight. That would be M. Night Shyamalan's 1999 film, The Sixth Sense. This is for a soon-to-be-released episode of Are You My Mother?, where I'll be joining host David Arnold to specifically discuss the mother character that Toni Collette plays. We had to postpone the recording a bit due to my son coming down with the flu a week or so ago, but it'll be on the way soon, so keep your eyes out for that episode, part of the incredible Glitter Jaw umbrella of podcast shows. It's no secret that I love The Sixth Sense, and it was fun to do some prep focusing specifically on one character rather than the film as a whole. And I'll also be covering The Sixth Sense in a more macro sense on the upcoming April episode of this show, where I'm going to cover the year 1999 with Damon Carter from the Neverending Watchlist and Seth Vargas from the Movie Friends podcast. And finally, this episode releases a day before the Academy Awards ceremony, so I thought I'd give a really quick update on how much of the nominated stuff I was able to get to. As is often the case, I got to all of the above-the-line films, though there were some shorts, some documentaries, and some international films I couldn't quite get to based on their release schedule or how long they were in theaters in my city. But I was able to see all 10 Best Picture nominees, watching everything at least twice, other than I'm Still Here and A Complete Unknown. I stand by saying The Substance is the best film of the 10 for my taste, but other than Emilia Perez, I really like this lineup of films, and I think it shows a range of film styles and film genres, illustrating just how strong 2024 was on the whole. So what do you think? Do you agree with any of my reviews, or do you think I'm way out of line with some of the scores I gave? Feel free to DM me on any of the social media platforms or email into the show directly at revisionistalmanac@yahoo.com and leave me your thoughts. At the time of this recording, on March 1st, a new episode of the regular monthly revised Oscars is only a few days away. I was joined by two first-time guests, Clarissa Beckstead of I've Seen That One on Instagram, and Sarah Shea of the incredible Shea Cinema podcast. And we look back on the 1934 year in film and the Academy Awards ceremony that included It Happened One Night winning Best Picture. Did the three of us agree with any of the wins that year, including Frank Capra, Clark Gable, and Claudette Colbert, all winning Oscars for their work on It Happened One Night? You're just going to have to tune into that episode and find out for yourself. And don't forget, while we make our choices for revised Oscars winners, what goes into the Revisionist Almanac is ultimately up to you, the listener. Every revised category winner made by Clarissa, Sarah, and myself will go head-to-head with the actual winners that year and what you vote for most across Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Threads gets the distinction of being called the revised winner. So make sure you're following the show on every single social media platform using the handle RevAlmanac. The more places you follow the show, the more opportunities you have to vote. That's going to wrap things up for my February watches. I hope you had some fun listening to this, and be on the lookout for more of this series at the start of each new month. Once again, I'm Andrew, and I can't wait to see you next time.